you really have to not personalize their behavior and instead say, this is an opportunity to figure out why. Because every kid dysregulates at some point. It's just some of our kids dysregulate a lot more, right?
Welcome to the Experience Miracles podcast, where we help parents find hope, answers, and drug-free help to overcome your child's chronic health challenges. I'm your host, Dr. Tony Ebel, and I'll be sharing my experiences as both a dad and a doctor on every episode. I can take the latest science and neurology of healing and break it down in the most simple and relatable way possible. We'll take on the toughest topics and answer your biggest questions through interviews with other amazing parents and leading experts, leaving you with practical action steps that you can take to help your child heal and thrive. It's time to expect and experience miracles. Let's get started. Okay, parents, this is an interview that I know many of you have been waiting for and many of you have been asking for. And even if you haven't, once you listen to it and you learn the incredible strategies that are going to come from it, you're going to be like, I wish I even knew to ask for that because I didn't know how big of a deal this was. Now, Dr. Roseanne Capanna-Hodge comes on the podcast, comes on this episode with me, and I have not met anybody in her space, period. She is the one that I've met and been blown away that she understands the neuroscience behind behavior issues, sensory overload, anxiety, ADHD, and spectrum issues. So that's going to be the conversation with Dr. Roseanne about nervous system dysregulation. Now, it becomes so essential in this space, and she speaks to it a million times better than I ever could on my own, and a million times better than pretty much anybody else I've met in this mental health space, because so many of us, even when we do start to get our kids adjusted, even when we do start to get their diet improved and supplements going and we get healing going, what we often forget, because it's really hard to even know that we're there, is how dysregulated, how overwhelmed, how anxious and how exhausted and how easily triggered we are ourselves. And so this is going to be an episode. We've ventured into these waters with the podcast before, but we dive headfirst all the way in about co-regulation in this episode. We dive into how to really just address this from a parenting standpoint and how traditional discipline, which is what we all were taught, right? See, most of us, none of us really, were ever taught parenting. Second, the ones we did have to model, our parents, they were raising kids in a completely different generation. The level of dysregulation, I'm the guy that teaches you that. The perfect storm has really exploded. So what we're up against as a parent is completely different than previous generations. So what worked for them is not what's going to work for us. So not only do we have to look at it from asking the question, are our kids dysregulated? But we also have to ask the question, are we? And what is the neuroscience behind that? Dr. Rowe and I nerd out. We go into that. So those science-loving folks out here, you're going to love that. But what I really, really love about this episode is because she's been doing this for 30 years and she's not a chiropractor. So she has developed other skills to help improve regulation. Parents, take a deep breath. Tune into this one. You're about to really figure out some things that have been happening for all of us families. Goodness gracious, happens to me all the time. This was a great episode for me to learn when it comes to parenting and co-regulating, how much more effective I can be in that space with my own kiddos and my own family. So you're going to love this one. We love you for listening. Thanks for always being engaged. Here we go. Dr. Rowe. Roseanne. My friend, this is, what's the appropriate, how should we fancy this up and go with full doctor? Or can we just get right into it?
Just get right into it. Everybody does call me Dr. Roseanne, the same as you. But Dr. Tony, they don't call you Dr. Roseanne. But.
They don't. And if they were to call me Dr. Anthony, then that's probably somebody who's angry with me, not necessarily looking for help. So, all right, Dr. Roseanne, this is a fun story joke that we live every day of our lives as PX doctors. And I know you have all of the answers for us. And that would be maybe another episode for the providers. But the challenge I'm going to start talking to with this real life joke is the one that you solve for patients, for families at a level I've never seen anybody not just talk about, but your solutions are so real life and they're so effective. So here's the joke that leads to the question. We always feel like as pediatric chiropractors, especially who are taking on these tough cases of nervous system dysregulation and dysautonomia and behavior and seizures, we call it the perfect storm, as you know, we feel like we are the most untrained, life coaches, emotional support, counselor, we're in there in our comfort zone talking neurology and subluxation and dysregulation, but then we're getting into parenting and we're getting into, is discipline effective? Is it, we get in there and we do our very best, my friend, but we care so much about these parents being able to have clarity upon what is happening with their child, what is really the root cause and what isn't. And what breaks my heart is so many families feel like, oh, this is, and they're told by all these other people, teachers, preachers, parents, grandparents, hey, it's a discipline issue. We didn't have no sensory in my day. We didn't have no ADHD in my day. That's just one example of a million voices they hear. So you are the boss at teaching this conversation between what is defiance, what is a behavior issue, and what is really nervous system dysregulation. So how do you make sense of it for us as parents to know what is and what isn't?
Well, thank you for that lovely introduction. And yeah, I am the boss of this. I've been doing this for 3 decades. And I also want to just say to parents, I'm a parent of 2 uniquely wired kids. We are never taught how to parent, right? The number one way we learn how to parent is from our parents. And maybe we had great parents, but times have changed. The needs of our kids have changed. Kids are way more dysregulated than we were in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, right? And we don't have the right tools. Now, with that being said, I want parents to know they have the power. I always say, think of that 90s songs that's like, we got the power. Right, exactly. And you just don't know what to say and do. And I'm here to talk about that. And I'm so grateful that we're having this conversation because the parents that you help so much, they are in an awakening. They realize, wait a second. Okay, my kid's dysregulated. Maybe they're not listening. Maybe they have sensory issues. Maybe they struggle with paying attention. Maybe they're beating the crap out of their sister. But we don't have to medicate, because we're making everything be a clinical issue when it's not. And even though parents are overwhelmed, they're overwhelmed because they feel like they're spinning their wheels because they aren't given the right tools. They are the right tools. And you can do so much, even when your kid has truly diagnosed clinical issues, autism, ADHD, all that. When you work with them to support their nervous system through techniques, through what you say, how you reinforce them, there can be dramatic changes in kids.
See, this is why we are fast best friends, because we take the same empowerment approach, we take the same scientific approach, and we take the same, you absolutely positively do not need to turn to medications first, and we're going for last, we're going for never is really the answer to that. And so very few people speak to this. This is a tough road to hoe. It really is. This is not everybody's comfort lane to talk about not only the nervous system, but to talk about parenting, to talk about discipline, to talk about dysregulation. And you can't even have a chance to be an effective parent until you understand nervous system dysregulation and you understand how overwhelmed, dysregulated, and our term, the close cousin or synonymous cousin of dysregulation is subluxation. And it's so freeing when you find out that that is going on, because then you can address everything differently, even honestly, kind of the thoughts and emotions inside your own head. So let's just start there. Nervous system dysregulation. What is it? Actually, I want you to answer something first, because I don't know. I know you know it like a boss. Where did you first go down the road of understanding the nervous system at the level you do? And then please define what it is.
Yeah. So, I started working in 1992. And I, started working with kids because I felt like, wow, when I work with kids, I could do a little tiny bit of things. I was working with tough kids and inner city kids. And I saw that if I did a little bit, gave them, different levels of reinforcement, encouragement, that I saw dramatic changes in their grades, in their attitude, in how they talked about themselves and to others. And I said, this is my calling. This is what I need to do. This is who I have to work with. And so I, am just that person who believes, like you, that there's really no reason why somebody can't get better. The degree of that, there's a lot of factors in it, but people can always improve. And, that's not to say, like, I don't want anybody, I support a lot of, neurodivergent individuals. That's just to say we're optimizing. It doesn't mean you get rid of your autism or ADHD, even though I've been on cases where they've lost their diagnosis. That's a whole other thing. But what happened was I always got complex cases, even then, even though the level of it was not that it is today. And so quickly, even though I was traditionally trained, I quickly realized that, traditional things, psychotherapy, medication, weren't not helping these kids. They often worsen things.
They do.
And so back then I went to the belly of the basement. That's where the microfiche was. And I researched and I learned about things like vitamin D, zinc, magnesium, neurofeedback, different kinds of things that my professors actually were very open to because my program was specialized in kids with learning and processing issues and neurodivergent. Mm-hmm. So just by then you realize you got to think outside the box.
Yeah.
Right. So,
just to pull on a thread, was it in the curriculum at all? Or no, you literally had to go to the basement?
No, I literally had to go to the basement.
Yeah, understood.
Yeah. And
same world as I had to live. It was not in the chiropractic curriculum, but I had to go. You know
what's different, Tony, is that my professors, when I brought it to them, right, I was in grad school, I wrote my first paper about natural solutions for ADHD.
Dang.
So, and I didn't pick neurofeedback as my dissertation topic because I'm too logical for that. It was going to take too long and there was nobody I had access to. So I actually did parent training, how to train parents, how to parent. And I went into their homes. And we're talking, these are families that were, didn't have access to parents that were helpful in their history, trauma victims, people who came from jail. And guess what? There wasn't somebody I couldn't help their parenting. And I was like, holy cow, we're just not teaching parents how to parent. You know what I mean? So, and how valuable were those things for me, even though my mom and dad, I talk about all the time, Tony and Philomena, they did a lot of great things, but, they were challenged they were immigrants from another country, parenting here, so I certainly don't do what Philomena did, which was chase me and my sister and brother around with a wooden spoon. Yep. I learned that that's not exactly the best idea,
Understood.
As funny as it is, as we remember, she never got us. She just did it to threaten us. But,
understood.
Fear-based parenting doesn't work.
Kind of like fear-based healthcare?
Yeah, exactly. So I had really complex cases. And my first case was a kid who's a full, man now, of neurofeedback was well over 20 years ago. He didn't come to me. And he was a most severe case of, I don't know what, but probably would have been labeled autism at the time. His parents had unlimited means to help him. He was just kicked out of school. And they came to me because I was one of the only people taking cases that, everybody wanted to medicate him or put him in a facility at 8 years old.
Yep.
And so they went and did neurofeedback, long story short, and I said, absolutely go and do it. I think it's great. She had to travel an hour and 10 minutes 3 times a week. And he came up to me some months later, 7 or 8 months later, looked me in the eye and shook my hand and said, how you doing, Dr. Roseanne? And I turned to his mother, used a couple expletives and said, what are you doing?
Yeah.
She said, that's neurofeedback. I mean, it's incredible. He looked like he was having seizures, Tony, in class. Yeah. He was intellectually gifted. I think he had like an IQ of 137. Yep. He couldn't produce a word at 8 years old.
He just caught in between that.
In between.
It's almost kind of like we refer to that a lot of times as neuropurgatory, which is a weird way to say it, but
Love
it's like
that.
part of the brain and nervous system is so advanced at this level, and then other parts of the brain and nervous system are so not at that level yet, and they literally just get caught in the middle with that. And my kids go to Catholic school now, high school, so I feel like even though I wasn't raised Catholic, I'm starting to use these analogies. That's a bad joke, but sorry everybody out there. Our office manager Jackie is like, and I'll run it by her. I'll be like, hey, I've got a Catholic analogy. I'm thinking of putting it out there, and she's like, you are
it's
so
okay.
far.
I got the super Christian following.
Yeah, right.
I'm Christian too.
Yeah.
But it's true. It's like a purgatory. And it was really fascinating because Alex came back as my intern when he was 16 because he graduated high school at 16.
Wow.
And so he stayed with me for a whole semester so he could graduate early. And I got to see him. And I didn't do neurofeedback, but he's why I did neurofeedback.
See, and I don't mean to cut you off. I want to pause there because I think we can share this. Parents think that us as providers, and by the way, if you've missed this on the podcast before, I have tried to say this 1,000 times over because it's so clear. Guys, our education and we'll call it upbringing for analogy on this conversation, it doesn't send us down the right path either. None of this is very clear for us. We have to have these real life, complex, hit us between the eyes and hit us in the heart situations. So I want you to know, parents listening in, that if you found a case, a child on Facebook, on Instagram, on a website in your neighborhood that had amazing changes with X or Y or Z that you had never heard of, follow that thread. This is how I got onto neurologically focused chiropractic. I'm like, it does this for these kids? Nobody told me that. You got onto neurofeedback because of one kid. So the rest of medicine, tradition, right? The fear-based medical system, who is all built on profits, they will try and say that case studies don't matter. That child's science of how he got better is the science that Dr. Roseanne would follow, figure out, master, deliver to thousands of other patients, teach to thousands of other providers. So the ripple effect, real life, mathematical, hundreds of thousands of lives transformed ripple effect from that one kid. So never be afraid to follow that one kid in your life from another direction, and actually I'll switch my terms on this, be excited to turn your one kid into that story. All right, buddy.
I love that so much because it's so important. And even just to add to that, be careful who you follow.
Yeah, that's true.
Is this a credentialed provider? There's a lot of false prophets now. Dr. Tony and I are credentialed providers who've worked with thousands of people. That doesn't mean that person who is my first person, but I had one of the best mentors helping me in the beginning too. So I found a path. I just knew really quickly. I am very in tuned. My mother made me very secure in myself in a very different way than most individuals in the world. Forget about a woman. And so as soon as I saw clients not getting better, I said, oh, no. The science is going to show us something. And that's what I did. Beautiful. And I was also very lucky because it was in grad school and my professors supported it and said, oh, yeah, but they weren't leading with it, right? And I thought by now we'd be leading with it, but we're not because pharma's in charge. But whatever.
Yeah.
But they're not. Because the parents are uprising.
They are parents. And you know what? I've taught this to our chiropractors forever. Moms are the marketplace. If we take this straight away, but moms are the marketplace. So when the market forces and demand shifts and one product is no longer desired and other products are, guys, these all have, it's already happening. Big Pharma.
It is happening.
It is happening. Big Pharma will they'll try and sell you your granola bar. They're going to have to get on board.
A probiotic, they try to make mainstream things, they're going to,
we'll see how they do. Good luck, right? So the neurofeedback journey with this case to this doctor, to this mentor, is that where you started to learn in the world? Because again, I'm not educated that much.
No, integrative started right in 1992. So cool. I started, teaching people about diet. Culturally, I was raised that food was medicine as an Italian, right? Oh, yeah. So I didn't eat American food, right? I mean, please, I had an advanced palate.
Yeah.
So, and so people would try to trade their lunches with me. And I was like, are you joking? My mother made me roast beef with whatever. And you want to trade a peanut butter and jelly sandwich? I was like, I don't think so. I didn't even have mayonnaise until I was 13 years old.
Mayonnaise. Sorry.
So, like it just wasn't that way. So, and, real Italians, they eat a lot of, we call it verdure, greens. They eat a lot of vegetables. So I was eating 2 or 3 vegetables with my meal, and my mom was like a 5-star chef. So, it was great. But I was teaching parents about that, and I was teaching parents about parenting, because as I learned, right, it's so great in your clinical experience, right? I worked right in psychiatric hospitals right from the get-go, from kids that were, 5 years old, living in a residential treatment center, all trauma, gangbangers. One of the best things that ever happened to me was, for whatever reason, I worked in a psychiatric facility for about 7-8 months before I was trained to physically restrain a child. So guess what? I had to negotiate and talk kids down. And I learned how to take the most dysregulated kids and get them to be present enough to regulate.
Yep.
And I hardly ever had when you're working in psychiatric facilities, this may be scary to people, but they like to restrain kids because it's a lot easier than talking them down. But when you're working with dysregulated individuals, adults, kids, this is an opportunity each time your child dysregulates or the child dysregulates to do that. So there were so many learnings along the way. It took me a while to get to neurofeedback, only because there just wasn't people doing this.
It wasn't in those areas. You would make a world-class adjuster, because to be able to make a world-class adjustment, you have to be able to get into that zone of dysregulation and already begin to calm the storm, earn trust, make connection before you make the adjustment. So it is truly, it's something we train on, but it's also something that a lot of folks just, they kind of have it right in that way. And if you have both, that's great. So this is interesting, because what I have in my notes to discuss today, which is exactly what we are, is, okay, a lot of parents and a lot of other people think, it's just, first off, medicine blames behavior issues, everything else on genetics. We know it's not that. But then you may go down the road and somebody may say, it's parenting and it's discipline. And it's absolutely true that this generation of parents needs tools and needs training that gets updated, because same as you said, my kids are all neuro interesting too, right? And even though this is my specialty, doesn't mean we just walk around and everything's easy in our parenting front, which is why we speak to it the way we are. So we're talking about discipline versus dysregulation, but there's another D word that we just got to. When we all think natural health and we think I'm going to get my kids better without drugs, we first think diet change. And diet change is essential. You cannot throw inflammatory, neuro-ticking off foods into the system. You're going to have a bigger fire to deal with. So diet change is incredible. But how many of our patients these days, Dr. Roseanne, have not only exhausted all of medicine and traditional, but now, please tell me you're seeing this, because I cannot imagine you would.
Big time.
They have exhausted diet changes. They've exhausted detoxes. They've exhausted supplements.
Yeah.
They've done it all. Hyperbaric oxygen dives every single day. So they've taken this diet physiological, I call it, it's still a chemical approach, but it's natural chemicals instead of pharmaceutical chemicals. So we've kind of let it get a get out of jail free card. It's still a medical approach. And what's really, really, really going on is that kid's nervous system is still dysregulated. So
bingo, bango.
Yeah.
Praise the Lord, right? So there are 2 parts, right, that, I always say that you have to do, and it's a big part of when we work with people, is that you have to calm the nervous system, calm it down. Then you actually have to teach skills.
Yeah,
okay. And there are a lot of ways to calm the nervous system. Food absolutely is foundational. Okay. It's non-negotiable. With that being said, I want to give grace to all those amazing parents who have restricted eaters, because you got to just do what you can. Right. And I don't want to ever shame any parent, because my gosh, parents come in here like feeling so guilty that they're not like 100% grass fed. The kid's eating this. I'm like, let it go. Okay. You're doing what you can, and we can work. I was on with a mom yesterday, 28 years old, nonverbal autistic, aggressive, but we're using some strategies and toning him down. And he's restrictive to a point, probably less than I would expect. And she was like, I'm feeding him all these green juices. And I was like, this is amazing. He's having green juices. Let's not feel bad that he's not eating, I don't know, kale and tomatoes and whatever. And I was like, this is all right. So it is important, all of these things, right? I think the other part that I always worry about the strategies for nervous system regulation, the medical strategies, the things like, chiropractic adjustments, neurofeedback, whatever, is the consistency.
Yep.
Right? Because sometimes people come in, they do a certain amount, they feel relief, and then they're done.
Yeah.
And we're not even saying relief to the point of really high-level functionality.
Yeah.
It's like it took the edge off, and then they don't want to do anything else.
I always call it, it's like a smelling salt of really, you get this momentary awesome bounce back because the nervous system has been dying for some calming and some regulation. And so it does have an incredible early response a lot of times, but that's got a certain half-life to it, right? The real change is when you get to that full reorganization, recovery. That's right. And that takes a long time and a lot of consistency, and it's a roller coaster path to that. It's not a linear path to that.
And you get the quick win, like you said, right? Like the strategies that you and I use produce quick wins, but it takes time for the change to happen, the lasting change. I don't do anything that's not a quick win.
Same. And I think that's on the providers. I feel terrible. Talk about before that. I feel terrible for patients or for parents again and again, because exactly the story I said a couple months ago, this mom, they got delayed. They're coming for an intensive. They got delayed at the airport. So she only had so much food packed, right? And they had to sit there for hours, and it's a freaking airport, right? So kiddos getting starving. They have to get on a late night flight to get here. And so when she arrived on Monday, she had to she couldn't even, because her functional medicine doctor put such a fear of God and shame on her about diet. Because there's a way to teach you this stuff in a very empowering, enlightening, hey, we got this. We're going to work on it together. We're going to do this and then that, but you're definitely not going to rebuild Rome in a day. And not all doctors take that approach. So the mom had to tell my staff to tell me that the kid had a mozzarella stick at the airport. And she thought because she thought I was one of them and I was like, awesome. And,
but
great. Like, you
said something really important that I don't want to miss. So the majority of people teaching about food are not credentialed providers.
No.
So I don't want to knock health coaches, because there's a lot of amazing health coaches, and I have amazing friends that are health coaches. Yeah. But you have to be careful with where you're getting your information, because there's a lot of one-trick ponies, right? Yeah. Like, Dr. Tony and I are learning about a lot of things, right? And so you just be careful. Listen to your gut when you're following somebody. And if somebody is so restrictive, I mean, there's definitely times when I tell to people, listen, don't do that. It's not a good idea. Like I have a parent that I spoke to, and they're fear parenting. Yeah. And the dad said to me, is this going to mess up my kid? I was like, 100% this is going to mess up your kid. Yep. You need to stop today, right?
There's some lines in the sand for sure.
Right. Yeah. But when the nervous system is dysregulated, you are not going to heal properly, right? Mm-hmm. So you're either not going to heal at all, or you're going to have delayed. So you don't get the full amplification of diet changes. You don't get the full amplification of IVIG if you're pandas. Whatever treatment you're doing, OT, PT, reading help. I can't even tell you how many times when I regulate the nervous system of a dyslexic and they're getting proper reading instruction. Love me, my dyslexics. I'm a mom of a dyslexic. And their reading goes through the roof. I've had kids gain 2 years of reading in 6 months.
Yeah.
Same instructor, same level of instruction, one variable, calming the nervous system.
Yeah. The most common call we have had from other professionals for my entire career, and it'll never stop. We're trying to get out and educate all these professionals ahead of time too, and be able to connect and work together, teach them about subluxation, nervous system dysregulation, and the fact that when you handle that foundationally, everything else works so much more completely. It is the most 1 + 1 = 11 factor ever. But the one in there, the nervous system dysregulation being handled, is the magic one. And so we get calls all the time from speech therapists, occupational therapists, physical therapists, counselors, psychologists, psychiatrists. Like, I've been working with this kiddo for every single week, twice a week for 2 years. And mom said they went to a perfect storm workshop and they found this one lady was funny. She's like, you found a submarine in their neck, which is not a submarine. It's a subluxation, just verbiage, right? Getting lost in translation. And then you did a couple of adjustments. Within the last 2 weeks, this child has made more gains with their speech than they did in 2 years. And I love other providers, Dr. Roseanne, in this, all the therapists, all the mental emotional health experts, and all is probably too much of a word, but it's the vast majority of them. We all care so much about nothing other than the kid getting better. We follow those threads. I have. Whenever a parent comes into me and says, hey, neurofeedback this or this supplement or that, I don't care where they freaking found it. I'm like, give me the data, give me the doc's name, give me this. I'm going to research it because if that helped you, it might help another kid. Same as our story before about the power of one. You know who doesn't do that though? And I'll just say this, we don't need to go down this road. You know who doesn't call us? The conventional pediatrician and the drug dealers don't call us. You better believe they have all heard in my community, been here 20 years almost, hundreds of these kids have walked in, parents, full of power, full of conviction, full of education, and their kids' life transformation. And they've walked in, and I'm sure they've said to the pediatrician, hey, we're doing chiropractic. My child is calmer, more organized. We're making all this progress. I think you should take a look at it. You know what the pediatrician does? Tries to scare them out of what's actually working when they haven't done anything other than make the kid worse. So lesson and rant over.
Pediatricians don't like chiropractors.
They don't. They don't like anybody.
I am a licensed mental health provider, so I can sort of get it.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
Right. So, and honestly, to be honest, I mean, I remember one time I had this pediatrician. I had so many of her kids, just whatever. You know how it happens? You get a nexus, and then all of a sudden, and this was at a time when most of my clients are virtual and live far away, but this was when it was local, right? And so she called me and asked if I could come in and show her what I was doing, and I said,
amazing.
Okay. So she said to me, well, here's the real truth. I had so many kids, particularly autistics, that you had helped that I literally couldn't deny it anymore.
That's all we want. That's all we're asking for, right? Like,
she
see what
grilled
in your face.
And then she said, well, this is like, at the time it was very focused on neurofeedback. She was like, well, this is still experimental. And I was like, honey, in 2012, your Academy of Pediatrics said this was a level 1 positive intervention, same as Ritalin. She's like, it did?
Yeah.
Where's the research? And I was like, I'll email it over to you. So, it took some cajoling, but even with evidence, right? Like you said, you were curious providers, right? And I think, for parents, even for us as professionals, right, we're still looking at things, and it's hard to make decisions as parents, but we're here, both Dr. Tony and I, to talk to you about how important nervous system regulation is. And your child's dysregulation those are only clues to what is actually happening in their brain and body. It is not defiance.
Yeah.
It is not them trying to be disrespectful. It is them waving a red flag. That is it. And
so take us down this road. So if we know, well, again, they don't know yet, but this will help parents sort this out. If a child is dysregulated, right, and that dysregulation of nervous system dysfunction kicks out behavior issues, meltdowns, tantrums, if traditional discipline is thrown at said dysregulation and its effects, how does that possibly or does make it worse?
Well, and let's talk about traditional discipline, right? Okay. So most of the time we are doing like what our parents did, right? My mother, Philomena, every once in a while, she would, a blow on my top. That's how my mom, right? She'd blow her top and she'd chase after us with a wooden spoon. I mean, we deserved it. I'm not saying that we didn't, but, and I don't want to insult anybody. Every time I make this joke, I know there's people with trauma and, my father was horribly abused. So I certainly understand what trauma is from even just a family perspective. I don't mean to make light, but I do like to, this is a serious topic.
It's real
laugh.
Yeah, exactly.
So when we think of parenting, we a lot of times fear parent, right? And that same parent last week who was fear parenting said to me, why can't she just sit down and sit in the corner and be quiet? Now, first of all, self-regulation, you're not born self-regulated.
No.
It is acquired. And the number one way is when we regulate. So when you talked about your amazing chiropractors who do the best work, it's because they're regulated.
That's for truth.
And so, we are in a place where the U.S. Surgeon General said 50% of parents are overwhelmed. I think that is probably almost an underestimate.
Way undershooting that, yeah.
And 41% are so overwhelmed, they're almost immobilized. So you're approaching your kid overwhelmed. And again, this is like Dr. Rowe just telling it straight. I'm not trying to make you feel bad. I'm trying to give you an aha moment. Okay. Because we know better. We can do better. So and this doesn't mean like you do this once in a while, you're going to mess up your kid. Okay. I'm talking like 80% of the time you're doing a good job. You're doing a great job. But if you are consistently overwhelmed by your child, you're snapping at them, you're giving them terrible body language, you're in screaming matches with them, you got a problem, you need a lifeline. And the first step, and this is my CALMS dysregulation protocol, but the first step, I try to make everything easy, people, so that you can remember, right? And because we're overwhelmed, but it's co-regulation. You've got to regulate yourself first. You cannot go in hot to a situation where your child is dysregulated. Now, this is not easy. This is the absolute hardest part of this whole thing, is you calming yourself down. So, we get triggered by fear. We get triggered by our kids. We think they're doing things disrespectfully. I promise you, even if your kid is lying, even if your kid is having 7 WWE matches in a day with their sibling, even if they don't turn their homework on time, those are just signs of dysregulation. Kids don't act that way on purpose. They act that way because their brain has developed habits. They act that way to avoid punishment because they're afraid, because they don't know what else to do, right? And if you're caught in a pattern that's negative, that's, it's only likely to reinforce it. So we have to regulate ourselves first, not just to approach our child, but so that we can see the signs of dysregulation and properly analyze them, right? And my A is avoid personalizing. So when you are personalizing a child's behavior, how easy is it to personalize? I have teenagers. Like, I said to my kid this morning today, my younger kid is like, he came out regulated. I'm not going to lie. He inherited that Hodge chill. Okay. But he's 14. 14-year-olds should dysregulate. So I was like, are we going to Universal? Just you and I? And he was like, well, I'd rather if Dad came. And I was like, I mean, how could I not personalize that? But then I was like, he's a boy, he's 14, don't personalize it, So I was like, okay, inside I'm dying inside. But, I could have snapped at him. I could have called him ungrateful. I could have done all that. But no, I just played it off, like kind of cool and stuff like that. That's not that is a situation that isn't an everyday situation.
For sure.
But you really have to not personalize their behavior and instead say, this is an opportunity to figure out why. Because every kid dysregulates.
Yeah.
At some point, it's just some of our kids dysregulate a lot more, right?
Goodness gracious. And some of us dysregulate a lot more so that's why you said step 1 is the hardest part, right?
Hardest part.
Step 2 right here isn't easy either. So that's how hard. I'm just kind of circling back there to let you know that's how hard step 1 is. Because if Dr. Rowe is saying step 1 is harder than step 2, if you think of real life for us as parents, because our hearts so often get out of our heads, same as, any other human. And so if you do personalize it, you do take that as like, oh, this is a reflection of me, that's just simply not neurologically true. Because it's just our kids are, and I'm glad you said that. Like, these are the reasons. Kids are not doing this intentionally and actively and by desire. This is just the level of maturation and development their brains are going through. They're not supposed to be at this like dialed in status for a couple of decades, right? No. Okay.
Oh yeah.
And then you throw the perfect storm of dysregulation on it, which is going to delay and disrupt that development. And you can really start to make sense of this, which is why breaking down this science in these simple terms. And that's what I've always loved about your content is you teach not only the science, but you've done that with us right here, buddy. You've already turned into action. And when you turn into action, you've simplified that too. It's sequential. It's got an acronym to it. So I am loving it.
Every parent can do this.
Yes, they can.
I mean,
Yep.
you can. And again, you can't do this if you don't do the first part.
Come
so,
on.
you know, how can you structure your day so that you can co-regulate? You know, I try to do breath work before I get out of bed.
Yep.
I have this ritual in the morning where I light these different candles. I have my different candles, but I have the protection candle.
Nice.
I have the abundance candle. I have the healing candle. And it's just a way that helps me to pray and set positive intentions for the day. That's what works for me.
Beautiful.
So, and then I do 14 million other things to keep myself regulated throughout the day. That's just what I do. And I'm not talking, I go for a massage every couple weeks. I do this, that, and the other thing. But honestly, it's mostly 1 or 2 minute things.
Yeah, it's the basics.
Sprinkled throughout the day to keep you in a parasympathetic, nice, I call it the hot tub, Dr. Tony, state. And, you know, but you're not going to be able to do the L, which is look for root causes, or A, avoid personalizing if you don't got it together. And, you know, sometimes like the family that I had, they had a horrible trauma background. I mean, horrible. And they are amazing. They are amazing. And they want for their kid, but like the idea that they had to get their stuff together, right? Because you got trauma, and there's big trauma. We call it big T or little t, little traumas, all kinds of things equate, and they're both important. If you're activated by it, it's a trauma, people.
Yep. Yeah.
But you have a way to get that together, right? And you might need professional help, and that's okay. But co-regulation is taking your nervous system, breath work, chiropractic, neurofeedback, PMF, yoga, meditation. There's so many beautiful ways to do it free.
Yep.
Best free one is breath work.
Yep.
And, you know, you have to do that, right? And then the M is modeling coping strategies. So this is where parents aren't taught this, Tony, okay? Because, again, we think, you know, these were very, very educated parents that I was talking to. And I'm using them as an example. Please know that I've changed and altered things, but this is pretty common, right?
Yep, sure is.
I have a lot of parents with advanced degrees, and they're like, I don't know what to do with this kid. Okay, well, we're here. But coping strategies, kids today, dysregulated kids are too activated. They're too much in a sympathetic state to access good thinking, to access the right language, to know how to problem solve, do all those things. And this is where kids and families get stuck in a reactivity cycle. So the kid is irritated maybe by their sex. Then it's time for homework. And the parent says it's time for homework. The kid blows up. Then the parent's yelling at it every day of the week. I've told you to do your homework. Why is this a surprise? Blah. And then it's just this way. And then this goes on every day. And this is true, Tony. Like, this is what happens to everybody. I mean, it happens once in a while, but some parents live in this. And this could be the morning. I always felt like when I had a blowout with my older kid in the morning, that set me off more than any other thing.
It's worse for the whole dang family, right? And even the bystanders, you know, if the siblings and the other, you know, if it was one-on-one, it's not one-on-one. It's one-on-many.
Yeah, the dog runs. Everybody's like, you know, and so you get yourself caught in this cycle. You're thinking your kid's doing this on purpose. Your child is hopeless, but ultimately your child doesn't know another way.
They don't.
Often parents point out what you're doing wrong. So we have a kid who's maybe got ADD, right? And they already have a hard time hearing things. Their focus and their auditory processing is 3 to 5 seconds delayed. They're not hearing the beginning of what you're saying. They're catching on to the middle. You've started a lecture, right? And then you're like, I already told you. The kid missed it. This is what happens. And so then when you're like, you shouldn't be doing that. Kids are not reinforced for what they should be doing. And I don't care if you have a sibling that got it, okay? Every kid is different. Dr. Rose kids are all different. Same genetics.
Same diet, same house, same, 100%, right?
Right?
Absolutely, yeah.
And so there's a lot of factors, and we have to honor that. Temperament's a factor. I believe astrological sign's a factor,
There you go.
like all kinds of things.
Yep.
And so we have to give them coping strategies, and it starts with us modeling it.
Yep.
And so really simply, when you're not activated and you are doing things wrong, or you're faced with a challenge, you actually, what we call vocalize. You vocalize your metacognitive strategies. So I always joke, because it's really true, I'm very clumsy, and I also drop things all the time because I have malformed thumbs. And so it's a kind of a joke in our house. So it always happens when I'm busy and I'm trying to run around. Yep. And so when I do that, I go, okay, yeah, I dropped it again. And then I guess I should clean this up and whatever. And then my kids, when they were really little, started just problem solving out loud. That's what metacognitive strategies are. Now, even when you lose your cool, Dr. Rowe is a recovered New York area driver,
I was going to say, you got a lot of it. You got plenty of genetic. You got a lot around you in your environment that could certainly set your sympathetic.
Absolutely. Yeah. So even when I mess up, I say, "Wow, I really messed that one up. I guess I should have did this, that, and the other thing." And then my kids would cue me, "Hey, Mom." You shouldn't have flipped that guy the bird. You know what you should have did? You should have did this. And I was like, you're absolutely 100% right. So you make it like a dialogue. And this is so, so ridiculously important. And it doesn't matter if your kid's 17 or 25, you can do this, because you want your kids to practice as much as they can. And you'll see that when they start doing this, and we'll talk about ways to cue it, that they start feeling good about themselves. They get accustomed to it. If you try to just jump in and expect your kid's going to be a master at this, come on. We're taking a whole lifetime, right, Dr. Tony?
When you're rocking this M, which is modeling, and which is what everything is about that. You want to teach your kids how to regulate and respond appropriately. You want to teach them how to eat healthy. You want to teach them how to exercise. You want to teach them to have faith, and be connected. You want to teach them how to work hard and stay humble and be helpful. These are all things that do not come through words. They come through modeling. They come through them learning.
I love that so much. Yeah. It's so true. And even like when I light my candles, I mean, I do a lot of prayers for people that I care about. I will say to one of my kids, do you want to say a prayer for this person right now with me? It's so important for them, the understanding beyond themselves, the empathy. That's what I was going to say. It takes time to build.
The understanding is there because what you're doing, and by the way, learned behavior comes through. We definitely want to hedge our bet to learning from the good. But when the bad arises, when we blow our top, when we blow and they blow, these are very effective learning lessons as well. My kids, this is so cool. I'm kind of just learning. It's kind of like I'm learning while thinking through this and then applying it to real life. I'm really loving these real life cases. It makes it so much more helpful too, because we all live this life. Like my kiddos, if I'm driving to school, we're running late, and I'm heated up, and I'm sympathetic dominant. I do Tiny, my littlest one, and they will all speak this truth to me. They go, she literally just a couple of days ago I did, and she goes, "When's the last time you got adjusted?" She knew that I was dysregulated, right? Or like, they just know, like, hey, how much sleep did you get? Are you, what's your screen time? And these are things that we're not lording over them. We have always taught them, like, hey, everything has an outcome to it. Good has an algorithm. There's a reason that this came off so well, and then there's a reason that this didn't. And let's always be aware of root causes. Let's understand them. Let's talk through them. So modeling, friggin' awesome. All right.
And again, you can do these things when you're regulated, not to perfection, people. Please give up perfection.
Yeah, toss that sucker. Yeah.
It stops you from doing anything.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I feel so grateful that I'm not labored by perfection, because I would never get a thing done.
Yeah. Well, I wouldn't have started a podcast if I'd have thought there was any chance. You know how many random rants? I think I was making fun of birds and Halloween and telling all sorts of stories all in one podcast, and y'all are still listening. So
I know. Same.
Yeah, use us as a good example.
For sure. But, it's important. And I don't want to minimize how truly instrumental in how much those little moments are an opportunity, because we're thinking about the big hot mess when your kid maybe is punching a wall or is hysterical crying or refuses to go to soccer or get out this door in the morning. Yes, those are important. And yes, this still applies to that. But the magic is in the micro moments that build to that, because they're not going to, at an innate level, be able to do those things. Like when you talked about your kids, your daughter saying you need adjustment, my kids will literally be like, "You've been on your computer too long, Mom."
Oh, for sure. What's your screen? Yeah.
And I'm like, you're 100% right. You
100%.
know, and I should have this dialogue with them because I'm teaching them and there's a real back and forth. But we want to cue kids. So like after that time where they, told you to F off and you cooled down, I'm not saying you shouldn't get upset by that.
Yeah, there's time. Yeah.
But you can't go into a screaming match. What you can say is stop. That is disrespectful and you need to walk away. Okay? Don't start a whole thing. And then when they've calmed down, be like, honey, I love you. What would ever make you so upset? They're going to say they don't know. And you're going to say, okay, the last time you got upset, you walked away. You asked for a hug. How come? How can we have that happen again? So you're cueing them to their own ability to solve that problem. And if you're saying to me, Roseanne, they have no idea, they've never done it, well, guess what? You need to restart.
I was going to say, you got to go back to that foundation. Yeah.
Build it up. Yeah. Oh, I like how you took a moment, even though you got upset. I love that you stopped for a moment. How do you think we can make that happen more?
Yeah. Yeah.
And again, you're going to get, I don't know. That's okay. Yeah. It doesn't mean you have to build it, right? The S is about supporting and reinforcing. Okay. We think in America, success is only getting to the mountain. It's not success. There are a whole bunch of summits to the mountain.
Yeah, buddy.
And so when we focus on the micros, I always say the magic is in the micro. It really is. And so when we're looking to extinguish, reduce the full-on blow-ups or the disconnections, because to me, dysregulation is overstimulation and understimulation. And so when we're looking to stop that, we have to go back and find those moments before the full-on explosion or withdrawals happen. And please know that this is not a one and done. This is a shift in your parenting. It's a shift from your wasting time, lots of arguments, unsuccessful attempts to parent your kids,
and driving the neurology, driving the gap, driving everything worse, because it is. Each of these moments is an opportunity to move in one direction or the other. Like the nervous system life doesn't live in stasis, right? Life is either moving in one direction or the better. Things are getting worse or things are getting better. And that is to reinforce the message of how things get better. And so let me go through that for a second, because this podcast right here, Dr. Rowe, is especially because it's gonna come out here shortly after a year or two. I am just so thankful to God, and I'm going to go on my soapbox here a little bit, all right, buddy? So this might make you a little uncomfortable because I love you so much, and I just need to really say that, not just through the words, but through the practicality of the timing of this message. So my prayer and my search has been over the last many months, like, we know the content that we're putting forth is absolutely making sense for families, to the science as to why so many strategies that they have tried have run into a brick wall. Why traditional medicine? That's actually the easiest one to teach parents today as to why traditional medicine has failed, right? Lots of real obvious reasons that are now in today's era pretty obvious. Now, what's really not easy to sort out is how come all this natural, holistic, integrative stuff? How come all these discipline strategies? How come all these reward charts? How come all these providers and cognitive behavioral therapy that's actually a lot harder to figure out. Why didn't that sort out? So what I've been wanting to do is to do two things at the same time. Number one, be able to teach people that, you know what, you might literally be going up a brick wall, going up against a brick wall neurologically, because subluxation and nervous system dysregulation is more pandemic in terms of how many kids are these days, and more pandemic in terms of the severity of dysregulation. So the quick review overview of the science, dysregulation is real. Dysregulation, which comes from subluxation, sympathetic dominance, vagal nerve exhaustion, the term for that is dysautonomia. The nervous system from the perfect storm. I'm not going to teach it on this episode because we teach it on so many others. So if you're catching this one and you're like, hey, these guys are talking about root cause, they're talking about dysregulation, but what's the trigger of dysregulation? Go to the perfect storm episode. I'll have Dr. Morgan put it in there and the team link it in the show notes. And the quick science is our kids and ourselves, we are living in sympathetic dominance, which takes our amygdala. I'm going to simplify it. It might sound advanced, but this is actually kind of a little more simplified within our Dr. Rowe and I's nerd world. So the amygdala is running the show for your whole family. That's emotions, that's eruptions, that's anxiety, that's overwhelm, that's anger. Everything is in the amygdala, and the amygdala is in the middle of the brain. And if it's running the show, the front of the brain, the prefrontal cortex, where calm, regulated decision-making and situational awareness. So if you're going through all this calm protocol and you're going, you know what, Dr. Rowe and Dr. Tony, and please honor this, if you truly have literally thrown the book, and we do meet patients who have done the diet changes, done the detoxes, and done the deep breathing and shifted your parent strategies and done that. If you literally are honestly, which we totally know you are, listening to this and go, I've done all this too, then that's where you know you need an intervention that carries a heavier stick, like chiropractic, like neurofeedback, like those things. So that I wanted to just spend a few minutes so you don't miss that analysis today. Second though, here's where I've needed help, Dr. Roseanne, and you're coming back. Okay, you are I'm calling it right now. You're a regular contributor to the Experience Miracles podcast. We got to do a summit. People have got to get over it. We'll put it in there to the It's Going to Be Okay podcast. Your book, I know, is going to be coming. You are a godsend because I don't know how to do what you know how to do. And so we run into a lot of families and a lot of cases where we are getting the nervous system more regulated. We are getting balance back into the autonomic nervous system, but the habits, and you fix my words here for me, buddy, and take this around with it. The habits that have formed within inside this family unit, and patients ask us all the time, what else can I do at home? I'm already doing the diet changes. My kid's so restrictive. There's not a lot more I can do. I'm trying to get supplements in, but they're a massive picky eater or something that doesn't get in. We've tried deep breathing, but they're literally so stuck in it. I can't do it. So the coolest thing ever is that Dr. Roseanne and her work are here. And what I feel like we've been missing on the platform, and then God sent me you through Beth, of course, the boss lady Beth and Documenting Hope. You own this in spades, and you are the place that we can go to say, here are the strategies and the sequences as to how we can do so much good on our own. And so if you haven't heard it yet, because Dr. Roseanne has said it multiple times over from the very beginning, she came at us with her thesis statement that says, we're never taught these things, so give yourself some grace, a lot of grace. Times have changed. Nobody told us that either. And the truth is, you absolutely are the perfect person to get your child through this storm. You're the most powerful person on your kid's care team. Us chiropractors, we don't. Compared to you, we got nothing. Every provider compared to the parent, is just not going to be able to be as effective. So I love Dr. Roseanne, and I'll shut up after this. You are so empowering to parents in their understanding and their science, but I love that you don't just leave it in, oh, I can make sense of this now. You are so skilled at, here's what we do. Step 1. Step 2, step 3. You just don't, I just haven't run into too many people who understand it at this level and then can handle it and actually send parents with action steps. So I'm just really,
we really are very synergistic, and
wild.
I love that it is so important. I really want parents to leave this knowing, and I'd be honored to come back, but that they really have the ability. And I don't want you, I don't care how overwhelmed you are, know that I've been there too, my Pan's mom, that you can do this, and you've just got to start regulating yourself and know that that's as important. Don't feel like it's selfish if you have a kid who's really struggling. Know that that is critical, that nothing will shift until you start with that. But you've got to regulate and you've got to shift your parenting, and you can do it.
Yep. Love. Okay, awesome. Well, we're got to say goodbye on this episode, but we are going to say hello again really, really soon. We're going to talk about PANS and pandas flares next time we get together. And specifically, I love that we're going to talk about flares. We'll obviously have to kind of introduce the condition and challenges that are there. But, a lot of parents will be like, oh, we're seeing changes and then we're going backwards. What do we do? And, we flare, right? So we'll come back and we talk about that as providers and practitioners on that. And then we'll just keep coming. So everybody, this is an episode, if there ever was one, to hit the show notes and get with Dr. Roseanne's podcast. When do we get to know when the book and the next things are coming?
Well, you're on my podcast.
Yeah, that's
the very beginning of March, and then
awesome.
My book's in 2026. I'm not officially announcing the date yet. The contract is in negotiation.
Let's go,
but
buddy.
It's coming.
Yeah. All right. You are the very best. Let's keep serving these families. I love being able to share the truth, share the science, share our hearts, and then share the action steps and the strategies too. And I am just so grateful for you to doing that because you have an expertise and experience in this level that I've never run into before. And
I'm grateful for you and all the parents that we support. Again, you got this, and we're grateful to be our guides for you.
Yeah. God's got this. We got this, and we mean that. We got this all together. Parents, you are not alone. You are part of our communities. You reach out. You keep listening. That's what we're here for, is you, through you, and to get to those kiddos too. God bless y'all. All right, Roseanne. Thanks, Dr. Rowe.